Right though, as our next film tells us, Scott, things are never so bad that they can't be made worse. But is the next film worse or better?
Stick around and find out as we talk about The African Queen, in which Katharine Hepburn's Rose Sayre and her brother Sam are busy attempting to bring Jesus to villagers in 1915 German East Africa, which suddenly goes rather poorly when World War I breaks out and the Germans forcibly conscript the villagers, in the process as good as killing Sam. With Sam dead and their mission over, Rose goes along with local mine engineer / handyman Charlie Allnut, Humphrey Bogart again, as he makes his escape with the mining and blasting equipment that the Germans would otherwise seize on the banged-up little tramp steamer, the African Queen. The two come from very different classes, Charlie a cheery, practical greasemonkey, and Rose being an upper-class prim and proper type, and, well, I don't think I need to tell you how that relationship is going to pan out over the course of the adventure. Said adventure is a cockamamie plan devised by Rose to sail down the thought-to-be unnavigable Ulanga River past dangerous rapids, falls, and German fortifications to sink the top-of-the-line German Könige Louise gunboat that's been bothering the British war effort with some improvised torpedoes made from Charlie's explosive surprise. It's a 1 in a million shot, so I don't think I need to tell you how that pans out. Now, this is for the most part pure adventure bunkum, and I can see why it was so successful back in 1951. Now, there's little point in critiquing the special effects from a standpoint 70 years later, but while you're unlikely to see the rear projected shots as anything other than dated, there's more than enough actual on-site footage to keep the illusion up, and this being another one of John Huston's successful attempts to get the studio to pay for his travel desires. I quite enjoyed this, for sure, although I'm perhaps a little confused by the very high esteem it's held in. For sure, Hepburn and Bogart play the hell out of the roles and have decent, if not scintillating, chemistry together here, but I feel they're a touch hamstrung by some very broad roles and characters and some not too brilliant dialogue, but none of that's a deal breaker. But for me, it's at least it's not quite holding up to its reputation. And if you're only going to give Bogart one Oscar, it's very weird that it's for this. I suppose there's other reasons to admire it from a technical or production standpoint, like the difficulty in wrangling Technicolor cameras in difficult locations and the gastrointestinal challenges the locations presented, but that's very much divorced from the on-screen results of it, which are good, but not mind-meltingly spectacular. Still, it's a breezy adventure that's well worth seeing, have you not done so already?
Again, we remain on the same page, it seems, Scott, because I really enjoyed it. It's a really fun adventure film, with a great central pairing. I mean, to all intents and purposes, it's a double-hander. There's basically just the two of them on screen for 90% of the film, if not more. And they're great. It's just that this is the one I particularly was referencing earlier. It's like, it's a really good film. I don't quite why it has this sort of lasting cachet.
Yeah.
It's not on the level of like I'll Leave the Treasure of Sierra Madre or like a few films are, of course, but like a Citizen Kane, where like you can see why it like lasted over the years. Like at the time, absolutely great film. You can see why it's popular, and I enjoyed watching it. I've seen it before actually, although many years ago, because this is it was a favourite film of my mum's when I was wee, and I've seen bits and pieces over the years. But yeah, I enjoyed watching it a great deal. But again, I'm not quite sure why it has this lasting legacy almost. Well, not legacy, but lasting reputation. I
was wondering if it's maybe that we're spoiled by the wonders of the modern era, where you can get 4K footage of any place on Earth. I can only imagine if you're watching this back in the 50s, it would surely have been like one of the first time you've seen any kind of the full technical experience of this kind of landscapes and everything that's going on in it. So I can see the nostalgia reasons for having it being a classic, but I think if for me, this is the first time I've seen it to my recollection. So without having any of that kind of baggage attached to it, it's just a good fun film. But yeah, not something that kind of can tap into that kind of era of classic nostalgia for either Technicolor or just seeing a foreign country in colour where you might not have seen it before. All that kind of thing. Yeah, perhaps the modern era has kind of spoiled that for me.
It could be that, 'cause I did actually particularly think about the practicalities of the film that they did.
Oh Lord, it must have been an absolute nightmare. Colour. Yeah.
And also, I will say also, a couple of times I thought, that's a lot of crocodiles.
Yes. They don't appear to be fake. It doesn't look like the models.
Yes, and there were definitely points in the film where there were actually near crocodiles. It wasn't the inserts or anything.
Yeah.
Or the entirely convincing model shot of the African Queen going down the rapids with the entirely convincing pipe cleaner, Humphrey Bogart, whatever it was made from.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, those are minor things, like necessity at the time, I guess, more than anything else. However, for all that, I've all said, like, I don't understand why it's got quite the cachet still it does.
For sure, yeah.
If you were to watch it, it's still bloody enjoyable. Humphrey Bogart's great. It's a kind of lighter role than you typically get from him, because he could do comedy.
Yeah.
And it's not quite goofy, but it's like much more towards that end of the spectrum. It's much lighter and it's really entertaining.
Yeah.
And I mean, for all the audiences were kind of invested or obsessed more likely with Bogart and Bacall, and a couple in particular of their on-screen performances together were like quite hot and sizzling. Katharine Hepburn could have acted Lauren Bacall off the screen, although to be fair, there were a few people she couldn't, in fact probably none. Katharine Hepburn was an amazing actor, and her chemistry with Bogey here is superb. They just crackle along, they fire off each other so well. And what I would like to know too is kind of how her character read at the time, or how she was appreciated by audience at the time, because it feels, given that kind of her class and her occupation, you feel that she's going to be one of those, well, basically annoying women. And you get in films who sort of scream and like get freaked out by like the most minor problem or icky thing. But no, she's like instantly practical, and I found that incredibly refreshing, and I had the feeling that at the time that would have been particularly novel. Yeah. She's just like well, the only bit that actually didn't ring true in this film was that Humphrey Bogart didn't immediately say, no, this is my boat, I'm not going to turn it into a torpedo.
Yes.
But it's like, she's immediately, it's like, even though her brother's just died, who she was only very close to, she'd spent all this time with him in Africa and on his work. She's like, right, we're going to turn this into a torpedo, we're going to get the Germans back. And he's saying things like, oh, I mean, you're going to have to jump into the river to have a wash. And instead of going, oh, I could possibly do that, where's it? It's like, she just does it. Yeah. It's like, she's practical, and I really appreciated that. Yeah. And at one point when the rain is absolutely tipping down, and Humphrey Bogart, this poor bedraggled Humphrey Bogart, Mr. Allnuts Charlie, tries to come into the little cabin he's effectively created for her, and she says, get out, because it's not appropriate for a man to be in there. Then instead of like him just being miserable the whole night in the wet, or having to be explained, it's like, they give the character some sort of, sensibility of like being an actual human being and not a stupid film character. Yeah. Where she realises, oh right, he's coming in because it's pissing it down. Also, it's his boat, so I'll just call him back in, and I'll even put this umbrella to protect him. It's without having to have a conversation about it or anything. It's like, yeah, I like that. This is a great character. She's like a sensible person. Yeah. Which those feel rare, particularly from mid-20th century Hollywood.
Yeah, definitely can't underestimate that for the time, because I believe there was some controversy about this relationship between characters because they're not married. Oh, and they're sleeping together.
Which has never happened before, Scott. Yeah. Never.
Well, it was apparently not something that the censors were particularly fond of, but somehow they got away with it, and it is all the better for it, so that's good.
I know. The moralising, particularly of mid-century United States, it's so annoying. Yeah. like when Hitchcock was trying to get Psycho passed, apparently one of the big sticking points was that he showed a toilet, and no American film had ever shown a toilet before. That's just like possibly the dumbest thing that I've ever heard. Yes. We can't possibly show toilets, it'll ruin the morality of our youth. Toilets, dear God, toilets, Scott, think of the children.
The temptation. I can't resist it.
Yeah, African Queen, it's a thoroughly enjoyable film. As I would recommend people watch it. It's not like a masterpiece or anything. It's a good yarn.
Yeah, really enjoyable film, but I would tamper your expectations if you're thinking it's going to change any paradigms for you. No, it's simply a good film, and that's enough. But yeah.
It doesn't live up to its reputation, but that's not the film's fault. Yeah. That's for whatever reason. It's got that reputation. It's like, no, very good film, and that's fine. That's plenty. One note, a final note I have to make on it though, it's not the first time I'm making a similar note to Nate. Katharine Hepburn is apparently from the Midlands.
Yes.
That's the least Midlands accent I've ever heard. At least for one that like could conceivably be from, the same hemisphere or in latitude too. It's yes, Katharine Hepburn from all the Midlands. Sure. I have no idea why that line's in there.